Well, good morning everyone, and welcome back to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Today is something kind of impromptu that I've been wanting to do for a very long time, and I just could never pull all the supplies together to do it. But today's the day. There's no time like now, right? So I'm going to keep it a surprise. Join us in just a second and we'll get started. And welcome back to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Welcome back. Now, for the longest time, I have wanted a design board, and I wanted initially a really large one. I have a huge quilt that I have hanging up on this wall over here. You can just see the edge of it. And there's some projects that I'll just kind of pin into that and use it like a bulletin board almost, especially if they're very lightweight. But a lot of times when there are many small pieces to a project, you really want something that can kind of hold them together. And I'm going to be starting on a project right after Christmas, right after the first of the year, that's going to have a lot of small pieces. And it would be really handy to be able to place those on something where they should go and not have them move. So I'm going to make a small design board. Now, I have seen other folks that when they make a small, and the key word is their small design board, it's something maybe 15 by 15. But I wanted something bigger because occasionally I do larger quilt blocks. So I wanted something as large as I could. I also didn't want to spend a lot of money. I'd rather spend my money on fabrics for quilts. So here has what I have come up with. I have this 2 by 2 foot piece of insulation board, and this is really thick. This is probably, let's measure, it's probably 1 inch thick. Yep, that's it. It's 1 inch thick. And I actually have 2, and I have a design board that I made, but I wasn't happy with it. Primarily because the piece of batting that I used was not large enough to cover the whole thing. So it had a seam down the middle, and then I had to put something that covered the seam, and it just never worked exactly how I wanted it to. So we're going to try it again today. So I think I've got everything I need, or enough that I can put this together. Now, this is 24 by 24. Actually, it might be like 22 by 22. Let me double check that. It's about 21.5 by 24. That's very interesting because I thought this was a square. Oh well, we'll run with it, won't we? And it's nice because it's really quite thick, and you can carry things on it. You're not going to be able to hang it on the wall quite as easily as you would something that was maybe made out of foam core board, but it's still going to be a very solid surface, like I said, that you could really carry a pretty good bit of fabric pieces on it without having to worry about it bending on you. So I finally, and this is the reason we're doing this project today, I finally have a piece of batting that is large enough to cover this. So I cut this into a square, and as we just discovered, our block isn't quite a square. So we're going to have 2 sides where it just is wide enough, but then the other side will lap over. And I don't typically use spray adhesive in my quilt studio, and I don't think I have any other kind of adhesive, but I do have some glue sticks. And we're going to try it because sometimes you have to use what you have. And I'll tell you, I don't know how old these are. We're going to find out together if this is going to work. Okay. Let's do this. That's a little odd looking. But it is sticky. So that's a good sign. So I think what we're going to do is we're just going to generously apply this glue stick. I've got 3 in this container, so we needn't worry about having enough. And as I don't really have a whole lot of use for glue sticks, we can use as much as we need. Now I'm just doing the middle of this, not worrying too much about what's on the outside edges. But I want to make sure that once we stick it on, it's going to stay stuck on. Okay. This kind of feels like a kindergarten art project. But they're the most fun, aren't they? Okay. Shake that off really well. Now, like we said, we're going to have 2 edges that are longer and 2 that will just fit. And I think this is the just fit side here. We're just going to smooth that down. And there were some wrinkles or some folds or whatever you want to call them in this batting. But I'm just kind of hand pressing them out. And it's working really well. Let's try the other side. You may be able to see in our overhead camera how well that is sticking. Now, over time, it could be that this glue stick doesn't hold, but even then, we could take this apart and redo it. Okay, it's looking good. Now, I'm going to take, and I think I'm going to trim this so it comes about halfway down the side. And then we'll just put a little glue right on the edge. Literally and figuratively. And still, I'm pulling at it pretty good, so it's going to be nice and smooth and tight against that. I know that's not good for what you're seeing, but I think you can see what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Okay. Now, this side we're going to be able to fold down a little bit. And this side we can fold down without cutting it off. So we're going to do the same thing over here. And I'll tell you this board has been floating around my house for at least 4 years. We bought it for a non-sewing project. Actually, it was not a construction project, but just we needed something kind of firm to use, actually in a piece of furniture. So we used it there, and it didn't bend, so it was a good candidate for this. And I had forgotten all about it and ran across it the other day and said, I think I'm going to use that. Okay, Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim this so that the batting does not roll over to the back, that it only rolls down the side. And I'm going to glue it all up, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about how we're going to finish it up. I think this has been pretty successful so far. We've gotten all of the batting adhered to the top. Some areas, I've got one, well let me say I've got one area here that doesn't look like it's sticking very well. And I'm going to go back and put a little bit more of this glue here. Now I will tell you this glue kind of wants to ball up and get shaggy looking, I guess would be what I would call it. And there will be times where it will want to leave pieces of glue on the surface that you're working on. And you don't want to do that because that's going to leave a little bulge underneath your batting here, and you want this to be as smooth as possible. I think we've got it there. Now I need to see what kind of binding I have available to work with for this, and I'm going to take just a short break, gather what I have, and wash the glue off my hands. I hate sticky fingers. I'll be right back. Remember I said we were going to do this on the fly, and on the fly sometimes mean that things are either not well thought out, to be honest, or our situation changes as we go, or you begin to interpret different problems and possibilities as you go. And in thinking about this, the bias tape that I have really just isn't wide enough. It really needs to be a bias tape that's folded like a C, so we have a finished edge on one side and finished edge on the other side. And I don't have that, and I want to get this finished today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my stash, and I have a piece of grosgrain ribbon. This is 1.5 inches wide, and I am going to use hot glue to stick this grosgrain ribbon on so that the top of the ribbon just is equal with the top of the material here. We should have plenty to get this done. I am going to use a hot glue gun, and we're just going to get started. Now I need to situate this a little bit so that I have the ability to see what I'm doing. And the good thing about this being as wide as it is, I can come in and use a pen to pin this in place while that hot glue dries. And that's how we're going to start. We're going to get started right here. We're just going to pick a spot, and we're going to put a dab of glue at the very beginning, about a 2-inch area there. And we're going to stick that ribbon right up to the edge. And we're going to press it into that glue. Now I'm going to turn this around so you can see it. I'm not worried too much right now about bringing it down to the bottom, but I am going to put a pin in, find a nice sharp one. Okay. There we go. Let's see, I think you can see that. I'm gluing right here, and I put that pin in. And it's going to cover this whole side, and then it's going to roll down on the bottom and be glued on the bottom. So I'm just going to work on getting this edge in, and we'll be back in just a second, and you can see what's going on. Okay, I'm getting right here to the end, so I thought I'd check back in with you. And I'm just going to cut both of the ribbons at a 45-degree, roughly, angle. And I'm going to overlap them a couple of inches. And I think that will help us ensure we get a good adhesion there. And right there where that 45 degree is going to be on the outside, I'm going to put a little extra glue going along that 45-degree angle, just so that that sticks, because that's probably what's going to want to come off first, is that area. Okay, we've got a nice firm seal. And what I've done is I've gone in about every 5-6 inches, something like that, with some pins. And I think here where this seam is, I think I'm going to put some in that I'm just going to leave in right there at the very end. Take that one back out. Put these little small white ones in, just as a little precaution so things don't come loose. And granted, this is not intended to last a long time. This is just intended to use. And when we get tired of it, we'll move on to something else. So then I'm just going to glue down the piece of ribbon that is folding along the back. And glue, hot glue can be hot. No surprise there. So you want to be careful that you're not burning your fingers. This is definitely not what you usually see here, but I think this is going to be very helpful for me, especially with this project that I have coming up. And I think that was my third glue stick, and that's the fourth one. This is a little gun, and you may use more glue or less glue. That would be hot. Give me just a minute. I got some hot glue on my fingers here. Now, depending on the type of foam or styrofoam that you use, you may have to use a low temp glue gun, because some styrofoams will melt. And remember, the only purpose of this is just to give us a little bit of a finished edge. It's going to help to keep that foam from coming off of the board. I like a good craft project every now and then, don't you? There's nothing particularly technical about what we're doing here. We're already more than halfway, and I got more glue stick on my fingers. Now, I think that if you went today and bought one of these boards at the store and did this, your board would probably be a little more uniform than mine is. Mine has been used, maybe slightly abused, and it's been sitting around for a while with nothing happening with it. The batting was left over from a project. We're almost done. Okay, it's all glued down. Now I'm going to go back and glue down some areas where I'd like to see it just a little bit snugger to the board. But there's our project board. And these pins, if you'd like, can stay in or they could come out. Let's see how it works. If we had a piece of fabric that we needed to go here, and let's just pull some scraps out of our trash can. Okay, so now just the texture of that batting will hold our pieces in place. We lost the big one. I think we lost two, but we got most of the others. So if you're not holding it upside down and shaking it, it's going to stay on there. And you can move it from one place to the other, and you don't have to worry about it collapsing on you like a cheap, flimsy paper plate. So I am tickled to death. We've got finished edges all the way around. We just need to take those pins out. And I'm going to double check with our glue situation here to make sure we've got enough. I might go back in there and add a little bit more. But we've got a finished board. And pretty quickly, inexpensively for me because I had all of the supplies. And you could use a bias tape here or fabric. You could have it come along the front as well if you like. This is just what worked best for me today. I hope you've enjoyed our little craft project. And we don't do these very often. Usually we're focused on sewing, but sometimes we need to be focused on the tools that we use so that we can be more efficient at our sewing. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you liked our content, give us a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and share us with a friend. And we'll see you next week at the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Bye!